Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm going on record today. I I've been watching the future, and much like I wrote about how I and others like me, we sort of glide between the fabric of creation in such a manner that we are looking at things from an inside out point of view. I realized that I think I shifted this recording over to the World of Unity, one of my Facebook pages, groups. But I'll let it be. I'll let it be. There's a phenomenon of existence that we are paying attention to that doesn't have anything to do with the phenomenon of the outer world. It has to do with the phenomenon of the inner world and the fact that our inner world was what created our outer world. And it's amazing the demand. It's like being in a prison camp where you're being tortured mentally, waterboarded, where everything's yelling at you about what's real, what you need to hold to be true, and what you hold to be true. Hold on, I need to write a note. And so this so the phenomenon that we are experiencing is really something like waterboarding, and it's so hard to realize that our inner world is our salvation, and that there are two kind of addictions to get over. Good morning, Sylvie. Am I on the World of Unity or am I on Facebook Live? I'm still trying to figure out how you work. Every time I get on Facebook Live, it has a different way for me to do it. So I'm learning as I go. But I want to go back and kind of recap what I said. I think we're in a most interesting time. Human beings have had the opportunity for most of their early existence, of their early existence to, I'm glad this is on the World of Unity. I'm glad. What would it be like if our inner world was our only world? What would it be like if our inner world, our inner relationship we had with life was our only world? And I don't mean that like isolating ourselves from people or from circumstances or from events. I notice as a seer that I get pretty hyper when I see how things are going. When I not only see how things are going, I see who we need to be in the face of where things are going, out beyond circumstance, and yet definitely related to circumstance. And so I decided this morning I was going to really attempt to try to bring together the way my mind, my psychic mind pays attention. It really is like sliding through the folds of cloth, and every now and then rising to the surface to engage in whatever's calling a person or an event or a opportunity or a voice from beyond. But we're in such immediate moments of now, right now, that I feel more like an astrologer that is weekly predicting the movement of human consciousness versus the movement of the stars, which also speaks to human consciousness. And what would it be like, I think to myself, if people really took on what I said as a practice for the week? But I know how hard it is, because some of the practices that human beings, all of us, may need to take on are au contraire to how we've been socially, I started to say indoctrinated, socially trained. So there are these, if you could be in the folds of the cloth with me, you would see that these things, you can see these peaks coming. And they're very specific peaks. And remember, I'm probably going to address the circumstantial world, but I'm more going to address the impact on the everyday human being's psyche. So one of the peaks I feel, I'm clairsentient, that I feel rising and peaking. And the problem is that in these peaks that are in the forward motion of time, in the linear, circumstantial 3D world, these peaks have a ability to degrade the human psyche, to diminish or to have you have an experience of a diminishment of self. And they are really coming from the collective consciousness. They're not coming from human beings. They're, generally speaking, they're coming from fear. It's why I made the topic, "There is no enemy," because every human being only has one track, and that is to do what they think is right. Even for others, it's wrong. Even for others, it has a moral or ethical disfigurement. But truthfully speaking, humanity is only doing what it thinks is right, some of which is horrific in some of our point of view. So as this storm, this pandemic of human degradation is going on, this virus, not the pandemic, not COVID, but the virus of hate and fear and blame as that's going on, there needs to be, I assess, there needs to be a group of human beings. They don't necessarily have to gather together. I think it's easier if they do. That can trust their own internal, we could say radio station, but it's more like consciousness. And it doesn't mean that the mind, the thinking mind, won't have loads of opinions and loads of points of view and loads of worries and concerns. It's really important now that human beings who are consciously conscious or seek to be actually go into their own psyche, their own consciousness, regardless of how they feel or even what thoughts cross their brain, and look for their, I'm going to call it paradise. We've been looking for paradise in the outer world, but we want to look for paradise in our inner world. And what would that be? How would we manage that? In brain entrainment, we would say, training our brain to go to a location in our consciousness that we have created, that where we feel safe and held and kind and protected, and in such a manner that we can experience by our own capacity a beautiful feeling, wonderful thoughts, something in your life, because it's never not something in your life that is sweet and tender and beautiful, and literally take time to train. Perhaps it's even the new meditations, to take your brain, give your brain time to be saturated by these feelings. The creation exercises, it when we write them, also very handy at this time. We're creating something pleasant, creating a future through our speaking, written down on paper, of a world, a reality that is pleasant and not unpleasant. So I want to try to put this as rigorously as I can and as instructively as I can, and offer it as a practice, if I make sense to you. But one of the ways that a human being feels these peaks of collective terror or collective fear or collective hate, which we really can't quite ignore anymore. We're on constant alert right now. We're just feel your body. It is in anticipation of how, it's like my mother was a violent alcoholic, and so as a little girl I was always in anticipation of something happening that would be unpleasant, and so I was never off guard. I was always on guard. So we have a similar thing going on in our psyche right now, and it's fine if you don't think you're doing that. I don't really probably have a sufficient evidence-based language to point it out to you. But what I do know is that you will experience agitation, an offness, a sense of alertness, a sense of not quite feeling good about your day. And this has always been true. It's not like we haven't had these moments before. The problem is that human beings have held these moments to be the only personal, that this is a personal problem, something wrong with them, that they need to get better about. But it wasn't then, and it isn't now. we're a collective species, and we can't get out of that. And just at a very simple, kind level, for me, I'm really worried about my kin, my brothers and sisters, and myself. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a certain frenetic agitation that happens if we continue to look for the outside world for the resolution of our inner turmoil. Not only our own personal inner turmoil, but this feeling that no place is quite safe anymore. I'm not saying it isn't, it's just this feeling. So I hope I'm making sense to the level that whenever I have the chance, I'm going to advise the thing I love most, and that is the human psyche. There's nothing I love more than the human psyche and its capacity to be one with itself, to live independent of the world around it. Monks do it, nuns do it. I'm not saying the socially adapted ones, mostly the ones on top of the mountain are the ones that have reached some level of enlightenment, meaning in the world but not of it. But if we ever had an in the world and not of it moment, this would be one of those moments. So there's two ways to approach this conversation I'm having. One is when you do feel that offness. For those of you that write the creation exercises, they're pretty handy to take that energy, that agitation, which is nothing more than being caught up in a wave of energy that is pulling at the very psyche of humanity. Yes, I want to say that again. There are these waves, these almost floodwaters coming through that are unpleasant. It's really the fear. And there is an ability to be healthy in fear. There are people in concentration camps that have done that. My friend, who's in prison for something he shouldn't be in prison for, he does that. So those of us that are not in those dire straits, we can do that. We can feel these waves come through that we relate to as just not feeling very good about life or ourselves. Or it can be real fear, not knowing where it's coming from and not knowing how to handle it. And this is why you want to go inside your own consciousness. You want to have a place within inside you that you can go to be held, to be loved and cherished, and to ride out the storm, and to be safe in the flood. And you can do it. It's rising. So for some reason, the greater systems of reality made sure I got in the world of unity this morning. I must be needing to feed the field. Rabbi Gelberman, he was the man that ordained me, New Seminary in New York. He had been sent here to New York to study for becoming a rabbi a long, long time ago. And while he was here, his family, his mother and father, his 7 brothers and sisters, his wife and son were gassed in a German concentration camp. And he lost heart. And one day his superior called him in and told him that he didn't see that he could carry on his studies for being a rabbi. And Rabbi Gelberman said, why? And he said, because you let something cost you your life. How does that honor your family? How does that take care of those who have died? How does it? What does it prove? That you can be destroyed and you weren't even there. So he went away, he got his 6-month sabbatical, and he came back and he said to his superior, I am ready. I am ready for life. So this short little Jewish guy, great guy, when we would come into class, he'd be standing at the door, screaming at the top of his lungs, are you ready? And then we would say, we're ready. And then we'd all shout, for life. Life isn't our circumstances. I promise. I've had some pretty hellish ones myself. And our circumstances are changing dramatically. And hopefully we have enough community, and I don't mean just where I'm standing, but around the world, that as things begin to change, families and communities gather together and they take care of each other. But right now, we need to find that place inside of ourselves to ride out the storm, our inner arc. And the truth is that creation exercises do help, because it's all about channeling energy. It's all about taking the energy of fear and transmuting it into life force energy. This morning I got up and I'm cleaning the refrigerator out because C's coming on Saturday. C and Alfie are coming back. And I had carrots in there, and I don't like carrots. They're hard to chew. And all of a sudden I had this brainstorm that I could cook all of them, which is quite a few. My daughter also brought me some from the gardens around town. So I cut them all up and put them in parchment and set the oven to 400. And literally they would be done 2 minutes before this call. And it felt so good to take care of them, to give them a place. It's hard to say it helped, because this morning I was fine. But it did help. It's like a bank account that you train yourself to invest in, called life. And that was life this morning. So in your everyday world, in the moment you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night, there's a tremendous amount of life available to you. A tremendous amount. And it needs to be invested in. I wonder about something. I wonder, it's a wonder, it's not a prediction, but I do wonder. I wonder how human beings can really survive and have the opportunity for fulfill life if their world's being run by the world around them. It erodes. It erodes our sense of well-being. It diminishes our sense of self. We don't have the opportunity for privacy, solitude, sanctuary with ourselves. And yet there's nothing more important than you, to you, right? So I think one of the things I'd like to pursue is I'd like to pursue today what you use your internal mind for. I'd like to pursue a few of these thoughts, perhaps to even disturb you in a good way, so that you can tell when you're letting these thoughts disturb you. And frankly, they will. So what's Tantra talking about? But let me tell you how much cleaning up all the carrots and wrapping them in parchment and putting them in my red baking pan, presetting the oven to 400, setting the timer for 30 minutes, taking care of them, and making sure that I could eat them. And I had to throw a lot of food out after C left that rotted, and it was very painful. And I did as much as I could to take tomatoes and fruit to the homeless down the street. Not because I'm a good Samaritan, or not because I'm in some kind of outside, blame, shame, guilt, that thing, but because I needed to find a way to take care of life in every way I possibly could. And I needed to be good about that. I needed to be really good about that. And I'm working on being as good about that as I can almost every day, to be good to life, to be good to it. And it's the charge I would like to give you, the opportunity to be good to life. You have your own ways. There's no formula. But it's also so important to be good to life right now, perhaps even for human beings to keep having a life here. And some of you have children. I think this would be a very important conversation for you. I think it would be very important for you to be good to life wherever you find it, and to ride out the holocaust of consciousness that we will experience and are experiencing, and to do our best to try not to identify it as a personal diminishment, but more at caught in the flood, caught in the storm, ride it out. If there was ever a time for a human being to be selfish, this is the time. But earlier I talked about what is selfish. The word is self means the self of God, strangely enough. Ish means of God. But to be selfish means, like my daughter, selfish means to withdraw from the world where you can't do anything about something, and do something about something you can do something about. And try, and you can even do a kind of a silent prayer, or an open prayer if you choose, or declaration or statement. You can say, if the need for me to participate here rises, I will be there. But until it does, I'm going to participate where I'm standing. So I had my daughter's dog the last 5 days. That was my being good to life and being good to what I love. That's the self-ish. We need to revise that word, capital S, elf-ish. Because we need to not get tangled up in things we can't do anything about. It will waste our day. And you all, many of you, know me as someone who builds fields within which new futures can rise. So I don't often get quite so personal, except it's the personal self that's going to make the difference in the future that we're now in. How each individual person reclaims their relationship with life, reclaims taking care of life where they can, reclaims letting life take care of them, like the carrots took care of me this morning, and the red, what is that called? It's an enamel pan. I had to turn my swamp cooler on because it was really hot last night, just to be cool enough to do this call, and it takes care of me. Your toilet takes care of you. I wasn't being funny. It's a shift in our mental perception that builds the strength of our psyche. And you have to want to crave it. Because the way you've been trained to approach life is to get your to-do list done and to make sure you survive at all costs, including yourself. I had a conversation yesterday, one of the toughest conversations I've had. I wasn't being tough. The conversation itself was tough, really tough. And it was a person, no one we know, client, a long time ago actually, who had felt that they were justified in taking an action. And remember, I work with people in the UN, and used to work with people on the Hill and other places that have a governance to them. And they really thought that something was really wrong. And they really thought that they were really right. And they were, in the actions, they were angry, they hated, they wanted to destroy, and they did. And I hadn't heard from him in a long time, and how they even found my number is beyond me. And I was really having a hard time yesterday. I had this strange leftover thing from COVID. It's only happened one other time, where my brain just goes on the fritz. It's really like you feel like you're in a blackout. And it's really rough. And then it passes and I'm fine. So this all happened on my phone while I was getting ready to black out and see if this thing that happened a while back would end again, would not bother me anymore. And it's the second actual call I've gotten on message, which really surprises me. The other one was an Afghani woman screaming because her village had been destroyed, her small village in Afghanistan had just been destroyed, everybody she knew. And then yesterday I had someone who had made a decision based in anger and hate and fear, and wanting to destroy. And then they realized what they'd done. I just want you to balance that against the problems you have. I don't usually do that. My mother was one of those, eat your dinner, your children are starving in Africa. Actually, back then I wish I'd listened, because then I would have been taking care of life while others couldn't. It was a really hard conversation. It was horrendous what had occurred. And everyone around this person and the particular country they were in were thrilled that he'd done it. But he wasn't. He didn't know how to face his wife, and he didn't know how to face his children. And that's where I got this talk. That's where I got this conversation. And I asked him a question. I said, have you discovered there's really no enemy after all? The answer was yes. And then I said, what about just taking care of life now? I said, you can let the guilt and the horror and the shame and the constant pictures in your head destroy you, but wouldn't that destroy the children's father and the wife who loves you? Made sense. And I said, I don't know the strength and the stamina and the capacity it's going to take with those images floating around in your head day in, day out. But I do think the gift is in the face of them, you'll get an acute intelligence, an acute consciousness about what the other side, how it works on the other side of consciousness, which is just about taking care of life, wherever you find it. Maybe hugging your kids longer. At the sidebar, and that is he's actually never hugged his kids. But he will now. Said so. And he's scared. He's scared because he never thought about taking care of just the small things of life, the opportunity to, in his case, for him, make amends. Probably for him for the rest of his life. But his wife will be better off for that, and his children, and perhaps others. Doesn't justify it at all. And it wasn't easy for me. I wanted to punch him in the face in the beginning. But that wasn't going to take care of life. And he'd reached out for help. So I want you to make sure that I know how hard it's going to be. And for some of us, we're beginning to recognize it already is. So if you have a desire for easy, good luck. That's all I got to say. But we have a chance that we never had before. And we didn't ask for it. At least the personality part of us didn't ask for it. But we got it. It's in our date with time. I think it might be really important to hunker down. Because as things come at us and as things become unworkable, we're going to have some spine, some stature. Some guts. We might even, some of us, want to promote a sense of kindness inside ourselves. Being kind to life. Caring for it in its smallest little measure. I have a wood spider busily running around on my kitchen sink. I can't touch them. They make me, but I'm not going to kill him. So he'll be happy about that. Maybe he'll still be here tomorrow and she can, or Saturday, and she can pick him up and put him outside. So it isn't a blanket thing. It isn't like make rules, like the Buddhist rule of don't kill any living insects. There might be one I'll kill. But I'll be very careful right now. I'll be very careful that I am doing everything I can to take care of life where it finds me and where I find it. And if I could relay to you one thing, I would relay my cooking carrots in the beautiful red enamel baking dish I've got wrapped in parchment. If I can keep paying attention and taking care of life at that level of simplicity, there is no storm I can't survive. There is no storm I can't survive. And in my opinion, we need to survive this storm. We need to weather it out, not by hiding, but by building a field, you building your field, your consciousness, your capacity. To tend to life. It's at a level that allows you to no longer be harried by the feelings, the sensations, the mental chatter. It wouldn't take a lot of us. Because the most amazing thing about this planet is the fact that she only takes care of life. There's not another thing she does. Not even one. It's pretty amazing, don't you think? So lining up to make sure all those carrots got cooked, because I don't eat them raw, so that I could eat them, took care of life for me. And also a sweet potato. And then after that, I'm going to cook the cauliflower. Why? It really isn't that, what's the word I want? Holy. There's another word I can't think of it. It's really practical. Because if human beings stay lost in their to-do, have to have vitamins so I don't get sick, have to balance my checkbook so my checks don't bounce, have to clean the floor because it's dirty, because. We need to add a because, not because. I balance my checkbook because in building my field, that takes care of life. Not me, but life. And taking care of me also takes care of life. But if you can hear anything in what I'm saying, we're all tangled up. Our neural pathways are all tangled up. We don't realize how subtle the survival mentality is within each of us. It's wound into our neural programs. You can also ask that question. Is my fear of survival running my action? Survival of myself, others, or life? And I think it might be wise just to step back and let life take a hand. It knows how to sort things out. Watch. I'll meet you in 2027 and we'll have a conversation about it. I just don't want you to be one of the casualties of the storm. I don't want you in 2027 to be depleted, having to recover from the horrors of the past. And want to get you on a timeline where steadily as you can, you keep taking care of life. And that phrase is laced with misinterpretation. It means goodness towards life in its smallest dominion, its most unimportant manner, in something that makes you feel good, pleasurable, happy, alive. That's what life is. Life is life enlivened, cherished, precious. And this is a future conversation. This is me having a conversation with you about 2027 and how to get from here to there with no structural damage to our consciousness, to our sense of well-being, to our sense of self. Some of you have known me a long time. I have a tendency to be correct in my sight. And if that's all I wanted to have people pay attention to, I could just be a fortune teller. Put the fear of God in you. But that's not the point of being psychic. The point of being psychic is to say what's needed to face what's coming. And then yes, it's up to you after that. I'm not trying to be right or wrong. I'm just telling you what I see, and I'm telling you the best way to prepare for it and to be rigorous with yourself about it. That's all I'm doing. In the beginning, for those of you that were trying to find your way to me, because I made a mistake, it said post, which I thought it meant you did the recording on Safe and Sacred, and it would also post to the World of Unity, but I think the greater powers that be wanted me to have this on the World of Unity page, so I'm doing it. I'm doing what I'm told. I'm listening to the speaking of creation. But in the beginning, I talked about what I thought when I feel myself being slotted into, actually, is a little bit like being a weather forecaster or an astrologist. That if I had a choice over people's listening of me, I would say that there will be times on Facebook Live where I really will talk about a peak is rising in the collective consciousness that will be disturbing. And the problem is there'll be peaks rising that we may not know the circumstances of. We'll just feel like, I was pretty sure when I went funky after feeling so good on Wednesday night, I was pretty sure when I woke up in the morning and heard about the earthquake in Mexico that my biological system had picked up on that, and it had disturbed my equilibrium, my sense of stability. But that was enough to just settle in and take care of myself. It didn't matter if it was right or wrong. It only mattered that whatever I thought created a response for me that allowed me to tend to the effect of something that might or might not have been the earthquake. That's what I'm trying to get to, and perhaps together we can get skilled enough not to try to find a reason for how we feel, but like the Jedi Knights, there's been a disturbance in the field. There's been a ripple in the force. And what I was saying is that there's about to be a ripple in the force. There's all loads of ripples happening right now. There are these peak intensities, these hyper spikes in the cloth of consciousness, and they're hyper spiking our brain too. They're hyper spiking it. And so this conversation I've had, that if you would like to go back and listen to it and take notes, this conversation I've had is really to how to tend to this hyper spiking time. Even if it's sun flares, even if it's something goes off down the street, a backfire of a car, the ability for us to stay calmed and connected to life is seriously important. More important than I seem to have the capacity to get across to people. One of the hardest things about being psychic is how many people tell you you're right in hindsight. It's very hard to take. I didn't want to be right. I just wanted to let people know how to tend to life as things were coming at them, so that they sometimes hardly even notice it, because the awareness of what might occur actually prepares the system to not register it. It's the beauty of awareness and preparation. It's how it works. You know, every time I do any conversation now, and this is really since the first of the year, I'm confronted with, and I wonder how many of us have this going on, I'm confronted with kind of not a too little too late. It is a haunting, for sure. But I get to make a choice in the face of that mindset, that thought set. I'm the one that said it's too little too late. I get to be the one that ignores it and carries on, because the future is undefined at this point. But there's another one about how do you, and this is for all of you, is how do we address the need for the brain to shift into where one's standing, rather than one hooked into all the circumstances of the world. How do I address that with most human beings having very little practice in it? Very little practice. And yes, it could be they don't see the value, but it's more than that. It's more that it's been a long time since the day you were born that none of this has been what was considered valid or real. The internal space, the inner consciousness, one's inner personal self and their relationship, and the validity and the value of having a rich experience of oneself, that was all pretty much trashed. And now it could save the entire world. You having a rich internal relationship with yourself could save the entire world. I'm serious. And everything will work to have you not do that. Everything. Everything. I use homeopathy, I use supplements, I use brain entrainment, I use environments I love, I use being with people I love, I use hanging out with crazy daughter dog, I use carrots in a beautiful red porcelain or enamel pan wrapped in parchment. I'll take a picture of it. I always say I'll do things on Facebook Live, and then I notice I forget them after I'm off Facebook Live. So thank you. I think I am going to probably end up more like a weather forecaster or an astrologist. At least I get it said. At least I get it said. That's, I think, the important part. And I will continue to work as hard as I can to become more skilled in speaking so that you can hear me better and your system will respond better to what will take care of it. I mean, how horrible is it to think about the way to save the human race is being in love with one's own existence for no good reason, just 'cause. Namaste.